Pages breathe when you're not there. Turn the key, the shadows talk back. Midnight rings you if you're dead. One more line, one more flight into the weird unknown. It's out tonight, and the rainbows of
Welcome to Felix Lubezki's Christmas Tales, where every story warms the heart like a glowing fire.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to a special Christmas edition of SL Tonight. I'm your host, Felix Lubezki, coming to you from this cozy holiday nook in Second Life. Tonight, as the year draws to a close, we'll journey through 3 timeless public domain tales that capture the heart of the season, love's quiet sacrifices, the fleeting beauty of life, and the spark of hope that lights even the darkest night. We'll begin with O. Henry's warm and witty The Gift of the Magi, then Andersen's poignant The Fir Tree, and finally, on the eve of the new year, The Little Match Girl. Settle in with your favorite holiday drink, and let's begin. $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the Mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below was the letterbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to 20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with a powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she only had $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. $20 a week didn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit nearer to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier of glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in a flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hang out the window some day to dry just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascaded brown water. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on a worn red carpet. On went her old blonde jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with a brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madam Sofroni, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madam, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofroni. Would you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madam, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor, she was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by their meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas, and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love. Which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself. Before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his steps on the stair away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit for saying little silent prayers about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, Please God, make him think I am still pretty. The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. Jim, darling, she cried. Don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived throughout Christmas without you giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I got for you. You cut off your hair? Asked Jim, laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet even after the hardest mental labor. Cut it off and sold it, said Della. Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I? Jim looked about the room curiously. You say your hair is gone, he said, with an air of almost idiocy. You needn't look for it, said Della. It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone. Too, it's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for I went for you. Maybe the hairs on my head were numbered, she went on with sudden serious sweetness, but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim? Out of his trance, Jim seemed to quickly wake. He unfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1,000,000 a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. His dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. Don't make any mistake, Dell, he said. About me, I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that can make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that present, you may see why you had me going a while at first. White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lord of the flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hairs. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, My hair grows so fast, Jim. And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, Oh, oh! Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it. Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. Dell, said he, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put the chops on. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wisest of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two are the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are the wisest. Everywhere they are the wisest, they are the Magi. A beautiful reminder that the greatest gifts come from the heart. And now, let's turn to a tree that dreamed of greater things. Out in the woods stood a nice little fir tree. The place he had was a very good one. The sun shone on him as to fresh air, there was enough of that, and round him grew many large-sized comrades, pines as well as firs, but the little fir wanted so very much to be a grown-up tree. He did not think of the warm sun and of the fresh air. He did not care for the little cottage children that ran about and prattled when they were in the woods looking for wild strawberries. The children often came with a whole pitcher full of berries, or a long row of them threaded on a straw, and sat down near the young tree and said, "Oh, how pretty he is! What a nice little fir!" But this is what the tree could not bear to hear. At the end of a year he had shot up a good deal, and after another year he was a long bit taller, for with fir trees one can always tell by the shoots how many years old they are. "Oh, were I but such a high tree as the others are," sighed he, "then I should be able to spread out my branches, and with the tops to look into the wide world. Then would the birds build nests upon my branches. Then, when there was a breeze, I could bend with as much stateliness as the others." Neither the sunbeams, nor the birds, nor the red clouds, which morning and evening sailed above him, gave the little tree any pleasure. In winter, when the snow lay glittering on the ground, a hare would often come leaping along and jump right over the little tree. Oh, that made him so angry! But 2 winters were past, and in the third the tree was so large that the hare was obliged to go round it. To grow and grow, to get older and be fall, thought the tree. That, after all, is the most delightful thing in the world. In autumn, the woodcutters always came and felled some of the largest trees. This happened every year, and the young fir tree, that had now grown to a very comely size, trembled at the sight, for the magnificent great trees fell to the earth with noise and cracking, the branches were lopped off, and the trees looked long and bare. They were hardly to be recognized, and then they were laid in carts, and the horses dragged them out of the wood. Where did they go to? What became of them? In spring, when the swallows and the storks came, the tree asked them, "Don't you know where they have been taken? Have you not met them anywhere?" The swallows did not know anything about it, but the stork looked musing, nodding his head, and said, "Yes, I think I know. I met many ships as I was flying hither from Egypt. On the ships were magnificent masts, and I venture to assert that it was they were smelt so of fir. I may congratulate you, for they lifted themselves on high most majestically. Oh, were I but old enough to fly across the sea! But how does the sea look in reality? What is it like?" "That would take a long time to explain," said the stork, and with these words off he went. "Rejoice in thy growth," said the sunbeams. "Rejoice in thy vigorous growth, and in the fresh life that moveth within thee." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew wept tears over him, but the fir understood it not. When Christmas came, quite young trees were cut down, trees which often were not even as large or as the same age as this fir tree, who could never rest, but always wanted to be off. These young trees, and they were always the finest looking, retained their branches, they were laid on carts, and the horses drew them out of the wood. "Where are they going to?" asked the fir. "They are not taller than I. There was one, indeed, that was considerably shorter. And why do they retain all their branches? Whither are they taken?" We know," chirped the sparrows. "We have peeped in at the windows in the town below. We know whither they are taken. The greatest splendor and the greatest magnificence one can imagine await them. We peeped through the windows, and saw them planted in the middle of a warm room, and ornamented with the most splendid things, with gilded apples, with gingerbread, with toys, and many hundred lights." "And then?" asked the fir tree, trembling in every bough. "And then? What happens then?" "We did not see anything more. It was incomparably beautiful." "I would fain know if I am destined for so glorious a career," cried the tree, rejoicing. "That it is still better than to cross the sea. What a longing do I suffer! Were Christmas but come! I am now tall, and my branches spread like the others that were carried off last year. Oh, were I but already on the cart! Were I in the warm room with all the splendor and magnificence! Yes, then something better, something still grander, will surely follow, or wherefore should they thus ornament me? Something better, something still grander must follow, but what? Oh, how I long, how I suffer! I do not know myself what it is the matter with me." "Rejoice in our presence," said the air and the sunlight. "Rejoice in thy own fresh youth." But the tree did not rejoice at all. He grew and was green both winter and summer. People that saw him said, "What a fine tree!" And towards Christmas he was one of the first that was cut down. The axe struck deep into the very pith. The tree fell to the earth with a sigh. He felt a pang. It was like a swoon. He could not think of happiness, for he was sorrowful at being separated from his home, from the place where he had sprung up. He well knew that he should never see his dear old comrades, the little bushes and flowers around him, any more, perhaps not even the birds. The departure was not at all agreeable. The tree only came to himself when he was unloaded in a courtyard with the other trees, and heard a man say, "That one is splendid. We don't want the others." Then 2 servants came in rich livery and carried the fir tree into a large and splendid drawing room. Portraits were hanging on the walls, and near a white porcelain stove stood 2 large Chinese vases with lions on the covers. There, too, were large easy chairs, silken sofas, large tables full of picture books and full of toys, with hundreds and hundreds of crowns, at least the children said so. And the fir tree was stuck upright in a cask that was filled with sand, but no one could see that it was a cask. The green cloth was hung all around it, and it stood on a large gaily colored carpet. Oh, how the tree quivered! What was to happen? The servants, as well as the young ladies, decorated. On one branch there hung little nets cut out of colored paper, and each net was filled with sugar plums, and among other boughs gilded apples and walnuts were suspended, looking as though they had grown there, and little blue and white tapers were placed among the leaves. Dolls that looked for all the world like men, the tree had never before beheld such before, were seen among the foliage, and at the very top a large star of gold tinsel was fixed. It was really splendid, beyond description splendid. "This evening," they all said. "How it will shine this evening!" Oh, thought the tree, if the evening were but come, if the tapers were but lighted, and then I wonder what will happen. Perhaps the other trees from the forest will come to look at me. Perhaps the sparrows will beat against the window panes. I wonder if I shall take root here, and winter and summer stand covered with ornaments. He knew very much about the matter, but he was so impatient that for sheer longing he got a pain in his back, and this with trees is the same thing as a headache with us. The candles were now lighted. What brightness, what splendor! The tree trembled, and so in every bough that one of the tapers set fire to the foliage. It blazed up famously. "Help! Help!" cried the young ladies, and they quickly put out the fire. Now the tree did not even dare tremble. What a state he was in! He was so uneasy lest he should lose something of his splendor, that he was quite bewildered amidst the glare and brightness, when suddenly both folding doors opened, and a troop of children rushed in as if they would upset the tree. The older persons followed quietly, the little ones stood quite still. But it was only for a moment, then they shouted that the whole place re-echoed with their rejoicing. They danced round the tree, and only one present after the other was pulled off. "What are they about?" thought the tree. "What is to happen now?" And the lights burned down to the very last branches, and they burned down, they were put out one after the other, and then the children had permission to plunder the tree. So they fell upon it with such violence that all the branches cracked. If it had not been fixed firmly in the ground, it certainly would have tumbled down. The children danced about with their beautiful playthings. No one looked at the tree except the old nurse, who peeped between the branches, but it was only to see if there was a fig or an apple left that had been forgotten. "A story! A story!" cried the children, drawing the fat little man towards the tree. He seated himself under it and said, "Now we are in the shade, and the tree can listen too. But I shall tell only one story. Now which will you have? That about Ivedy or about Humpty Dumpty, who tumbled downstairs, and yet after all came to the throne and married the princess?" "Ivedy, cried some. "Humpty Dumpty," cried the others. There was such a bawling and screaming. The Fir Tree alone was silent, and he thought to himself, "Am I not to bawl with the rest? Am I to do nothing whatever?" For he was one of the company, and had done what he had to do. And the man told about Humpty Dumpty that tumbled down, who notwithstanding came to the throne, and at last married the princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried, "Oh, go on, do go on!" They wanted to hear about Ivedy too. But the little man only told them about Humpty Dumpty. The fir tree stood quite still and absorbed in thought. The birds in the wood have never related the likes of this. Humpty Dumpty fell downstairs, and yet he married the princess. Yes, yes, that's the way of the world, thought the fir tree, and believed it all, because the man who told the story was so good-looking. Well, well, who knows? Perhaps I may fall downstairs too and get a princess as a wife. And he looked forward with joy to the morrow, when he hoped to be decked out again with lights, playthings, fruits, and tinsel. I won't tremble tomorrow, thought the fir tree. I will enjoy the full all my splendor. Tomorrow I shall hear again the story of Humpty Dumpty, and perhaps that of Ivy Avity too. And the whole night the tree stood still and in deep thought. In the morning the servant and the housemaid came in. Now then the splendor will begin again, thought the fir. But they dragged him out of the room, and up the stairs into the loft, and here in a dark corner where no daylight could enter, they left him. What's the meaning of this? Thought the tree. What am I to do here? What shall I hear now, I wonder? And he leaned against the wall, lost in reverie. Time enough had he, too, for his reflections, for days and nights passed on, and nobody came up. When at last somebody did come, it was only to put some great trunks in a corner, out of the way. There stood the tree, quite hidden. It seemed as if he'd been entirely forgotten. 'Tis now winter out of doors, thought the tree. The earth is hard and covered with snow. Men cannot plant me now, and therefore I have been put here under shelter till the springtime comes. How thoughtful that is! How kind man is, after all, if it is only were not so dark here, and so terribly lonely. Not even a hare. And out in the woods it was so pleasant when the snow was on the ground, and the hare leaped by. Yes, even when he jumped over me, but I did not like it then. It is really terribly lonely here. Squeak, squeak, said a little mouse, at the same moment, peeping out of his hole. And then another little one came. They snuffed about the fir tree, rustling among the branches. It's dreadfully cold, said the mouse, but for that it would be delightful here, old fir, wouldn't it? I'm by no means old, said the fir tree. There are many one considerably older than I am. Where do you come from? Asked the mice, and what can you do? They were so extremely curious. Tell us about the most beautiful spot on earth. Have you never been there? Were you never in the larder, where cheese lie on the shelves and hams hang from above, where one dances on about the tallow candles, that place where one enters lean and comes out again fat and portly? I know no such place, said the tree. But I know the wood, where the sun shines and where the little birds sing. And then he told all about his youth, and the little mice had never heard the like before, and they listened and said, Well, to be sure, how much have you seen? How happy you must have been. Ah, I, said the fir tree, thinking over what he had himself related. Yes, in reality, those were happy times. And then he told about Christmas Eve, when he was decked out with cakes and candles. Oh, said the little mice, how fortunate you have been, old fir tree. I am by no means old, said he. I came from the wood this winter. I am in my prime, and I'm only rather short for my age. What delightful stories you know, said the mice. And the next night they came with 4 other little mice, who were to hear what the tree recounted. And the more he related, the more he remembered himself, and it appeared as if those times had really been happy times. But they may still come. They may still come. Humpty Dumpty fell downstairs, and yet he got a princess. And he thought at the moment of a nice little birch tree growing out in the woods, to the fir that would be a real charming princess. Who is Humpty Dumpty? Asked the mice. So then the fir tree told the whole fairy tale, for he could remember every single word of it, and the little mice jumped for joy up to the very top of the tree. Next night 2 more mice came, and on Sunday 2 rats even, but they said the stories were not interesting, which vexed the little mice, and they too now began to think them not so very amusing either. Do you know only one story? Asked the rats. Only that one, answered the tree. I heard it on my happiest evening, but I did not know then how happy I was. It is a very stupid story. Don't you know one about bacon and tallow candles? Can't you tell any larder stories? No, said the tree. Then goodbye, said the rats, and they went home. At last the little mice stayed away also, and the tree sighed. After all, it was very pleasant when the sleek little mice sat around me and listened to what I told them. Now that is over too, but I will take good care to enjoy myself when I am brought out again. But when was that to be? Why, one morning there came a quantity of people and set to work in the loft. The trunks were moved, the tree was pulled out and thrown, rather hard, it is true, down on the floor, and a man drew him towards the stairs where the daylight shone. Now a merry life will begin again, thought the tree. He felt the fresh air, the first sunbeam, and now he was out in the courtyard. All passed so quickly, there was so much going on around him. The tree quite forgot to look to himself. The court adjoined a garden, and all was in flower. The roses hung so fresh and odorous over the balustrade. The lindens were in blossom. The swallows flew by, and said, "Quarrel-vee, my husband is come." But it was not the fir tree that they meant. "Now then I shall really enjoy life," said he exultingly, and spread out his branches. But alas, they were all withered and yellow. It was in a corner that he lay, among weeds and nettles. The gold star of tinsel was still on top of the tree and glittered in the sunshine. In the courtyard some of the merry children were playing who had danced at Christmas round the fir tree, and were so glad at the sight of it. One of the youngest ran and tore off the golden star. "Only look what is still on the ugly old Christmas tree," said he, trampling on the branches, so that they all cracked beneath his feet. And the tree beheld all the beauty of the flowers and the freshness in the garden. He beheld himself, and he wished he had remained in his dark corner in the loft. He thought of his first youth in the wood, and of the merry Christmas Eve, and of the little mice who had listened with so much pleasure to the story of Humpty Dumpty. "'Tis over, 'tis past," said the poor tree. "Had I but rejoiced when I had reason to do so, but now 'tis past, 'tis past." And the gardener's boy chopped the tree into small pieces. There was a whole heap lying there. The wood flamed up splendidly under the large brewing copper, and it sighed so deeply. Each sigh was like a shot. The boy played about in the court, and the youngest wore the gold star on his breast, which the tree had had on the happiest evening of his life. However, that was over now. The tree gone, the story had an end. All was over. Every tale must end at last. A gentle nudge to cherish the now, for every moment is a gift. And as the old year fades, our final tale takes us to the last evening of the year. Andersen's heartbreaking, yet luminous, The Little Magical. Most terribly cold it was. It snowed, and was nearly quite dark, and evening, the last evening of the year. In this cold and darkness there went along the street a poor little girl, bareheaded and with naked feet. When she left home she had slippers on, it is true, but what was the good of that? They were very large slippers, which her mother had hitherto worn. So large were they, and the poor little thing lost them as she scuffled away across the street, because of two carriages that rolled by dreadfully fast. One slipper was nowhere to be found. The other had been laid hold of by an urchin, and off he ran with it. He thought it would do capitally for a cradle when he some day or other should have children himself. So the little maiden walked on with her tiny naked feet, that were quite red and blue from cold. She carried a quantity of matches in an old apron, and she held a bundle of them in her hand. Nobody had bought anything of her the whole lively long day, but no one given her a single farthing. She crept along, trembling with cold and hunger, a very picture of sorrow, the poor little thing. The flakes of snow covered her long fair hair, which fell in beautiful curls around her neck, but of that, of course, she never once now thought. From all the windows the candles were gleaming, and it smelt so deliciously of roast goose, for you know it was New Year's Eve. Yes, of that she thought. In a corner formed by two houses, of which one advanced more than the other, she seated herself down and cowered together. Her little feet she had drawn up close to her, but she grew colder and colder, and to go home she did not venture, for she had not sold any matches, and could not bring a farthing of money. From her father she would certainly get blows, and at home it was cold too, for above her she only had the roof, through which the wind whistled, even though the largest cracks were stopped up with straw and rags. Her little hands were almost numbed with cold. Oh, what a match might afford her a world of comfort if she only dared take a single one out of the bundle, draw it against the wall, and warm her fingers by it. She drew one out. Whoosh! How it blazed, how it burned! It was warm, bright flame, like a candle, as she held her hands over it. It was a wonderful light. It seemed really to the little maiden as though she were sitting before a large iron stove, with burnished brass feet and a brass ornament at top. The fire burned with such blessed influence. It warmed so delightfully. The little girl had already stretched out her feet to warm them too, but the small flame went out. The stove vanished. She had only the remains of a burnt-out match in her hand. She rubbed another against the wall. It burned brightly, and where the light fell on the wall, there the wall became transparent, like a veil, so that she could see into the room. On the table was spread a snow-white tablecloth. Upon it was a splendid porcelain service, and the roast goose was steaming famously with the stuffing of apple and dried plums. And what was still more capital to behold was, the goose hopped down from the dish, reeled about on the floor with knife and fork in its breast, till it came up to the poor little girl, when the match went out, and nothing but the thick, cold, damp wall was left behind. She lighted another match. Now there she was sitting under the most magnificent Christmas tree. It was still larger and more decorated than the one with which she had seen through the glass door in the rich merchant's house. Thousands of lights were burned on the green branches, and gaily colored pictures, such as she had seen in the shop windows, looked down upon her. The little maiden stretched out her hands toward them when the match went out. The lights of the Christmas tree rose higher and higher. She saw them now as stars in heaven. One fell down and formed a long trail of fire. "Someone is just dead," said the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only person who had loved her, who was now no more, had told her that when a star falls, a soul ascends to God. She drew another match against the wall. It was again light, and in the luster there stood the old grandmother, so bright and radiant, so mild and with such expression of love. "Grandmother!" cried the little one. "Oh, take me with you. You go away when the match burns out. You vanish like the warm stove, like the delicious roast goose, and like the magnificent Christmas tree." And she rubbed the whole bundle of matches quickly against the wall, for she wanted to be quite sure of keeping her grandmother near her. And the matches gave such a brilliant light that if it was brighter than at noonday, never formerly had the grandmother been so beautiful and so tall. She took the little maiden on her arm, and both flew in brightness and in joy, so high, so very high, and then above was neither cold, nor hunger, nor anxiety. They were with God. Then in the corner, at the cold hour of dawn, sat the poor girl, with rosy cheeks and a smiling mouth, leaning against the wall, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. Stiff and stark sat the child there with her matches, of which one bundle had been burnt. She wanted to warm herself, people said. No one had the slightest suspicion of what beautiful things she had seen. No one even dreamed of the splendor in which, with her grandmother, she had entered on the joys of a new year. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey through these classic tales. From selfless love, to living fully in the present, to finding eternal light in the coldest darkness. May these stories remind us of the true spirit of Christmas and the promise of a new year. As we close this special episode, here's a beautiful musical reflection to carry us forward. Wendy and Lisa's The Closing of the Year from the film Toys. Happy holiday, friends. See you in the new year on SL Tonight. Good night.
Welcome to Felix Lubezki's Christmas Tales, where every story warms the heart like a glowing fire.